future, but it did not work out. I need you to put up the Chris Vanini tweet now.
Yeah.
Here's Chris Vanini. Details on the private equity proposed college football Super League. Andrew Marchand and Stuart Mandel with a double dip in theathletic.com would have all FBS but 70 teams in a top tier plus a promotion tier, one entity, pay players, and everything. But most college leaders are skeptical. That just launched on theathletic.com.
Well, going to need some time to digest that, but that's certainly very interesting. It's a pitch, as he mentions, from executives, a group of influential sports leaders and college presidents pitching a drastic change. And we've heard all the talk about the Super League these last few years and various insiders of what exactly that would look like, and lots of speculation and anonymous sources and things that have all kind of been bubbling to the point where, regardless of where the information is coming from, you're hearing it so often, like there's got to be something to this, but what exactly is it? And here's part of kind of the unveiling, I guess, of where minds are right now.
Skeptical, remember that word, though.
Yeah.
But here, let me read a little bit of this. I don't like to read too much. The current, what is that group, outline would create a system that would have the top 70 programs, because we've always heard it might be 45 or 50, all members of the 5 former major conferences plus Notre Dame and new ACC member SMU as permanent members and encompass all 130-plus FBS universities. Here's what they say. 7 10-team divisions of perpetual members joined by an 8th division of teams that would be promoted from the second tier. A 50-plus second division teams would have the opportunity to compete their way into the upper division, very similar to European football leagues.
Yeah, college.
This is kind of fun just to read
wants
it.
to be soccer so bad and has for so long. I mean, I've seen the articles from Bill Connolly and the like for years and years now of why they've, felt like soccer was the model that college football to aspire to. The relegation part, that's something that I think I'm not a huge fan of it. I think the problem is in the way it was presented a lot of the times was that you were talking about like Big 12 teams or ACC teams are having to fight, and there's just that would not be possible because you couldn't recruit. You have to know where you're going to be.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do something like that, that part never made sense to me. And however, if you were to do that with schools who are all on the same page, like at the lower level of they want to be in the power whatever, and they'll do anything to get there, and they're all competing with similar schools as far as budgets and things like that, I do think that can make for an incredibly fun race, like the conference tournaments we see of who gets into March Madness. Like you could have that element of James Madison, or they get into the league and then they drop if they don't perform well. I see where that could be interesting. I just never was on board with like Oklahoma State has a bad year and suddenly they're out and then they got to like that never made sense to me.
This thing makes a lot of sense, although it's such a drastic shift on what we're used to, but it would probably put the teams back fairly regional.
But if you're OU and Texas or the teams that are leaving to go to these monster conferences, and they say there would be 7 10-team divisions, so you wouldn't have an SEC or you wouldn't have a Big Ten. You
I haven't read it all, so if that's what they're saying, then
But here's a nice little bit of flavor on the top for me as a person who is now in a blood feud against the selection committee. The playoffs would not require a selection committee, as the 8 division winners and 8 wild cards from the top tier would go to the postseason. The wild card spots would be determined.
And it would take 9 years to make sure
by record and tiebreakers, much like the NFL.
Yep. Chief among the obstacles this new venture faces are the billions of dollars in TV deals that are all the top conferences have locked in with major networks. The FBS conferences recently signed off on a new 6-year, $8 billion extension with ESPN for the exclusive rights to expand college football, the playoff. It's a lot of fun to read, though.
Also, because of all the deals and money they have, the Big Ten and SEC don't want to share that money. That's the whole point. Is like, if you do this, that means that the Big Ten and the SEC have to agree to share the money, which now
it could be in a ratio.
Yeah, I like.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We're all going to need to digest this a little bit because it's just popping off, and there's obviously a lot of elements to this, and we need to reinforce this is a pitch.
Yeah, this is
This
just
is
an
not
idea.
like this is
Yeah.
now the next step. I just saw like our buddy Jason Shear in passing, like, is it okay if I like college football the way that it is? And I'm kind of the same mindset, although I think the majority of fans out there who are not a part of the SEC and the Big Ten would probably grab this like a life preserver and hold on as tight as humanly possible, as opposed to this idea that some have been trying to float of, you're not in the club and you're just banished and you have no chance of ever competing for titles again, which I think is just like just a weird idea which doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme of things to want to eliminate when there's clearly desires for live sports and inventory and all these different events, and like to think that you're just going to cast people aside. I have never really bought that element of it, but this would seem to satiate everybody's appetite to some extent. Now, again, the devil's in the details, and this is just a pitch. So here's what's happening. They're floating this out there, and they're going to get everybody's reaction to it, and goofs like us and everybody on Twitter, and they're going to see what the reaction to it is like anything else, and then go from there. But if the Super League is a league where all of the major conferences are still all the major conferences for the most part, and then you have those who have been dying to get in the door, you're giving them the hook in the water of, hey, you have this relegation piece to it, then we'll see on the money details, but would that not be the best case scenario? I mean, just in general, and I know that, like I said, the devil's in the details, because if you're doing this for a lot less money, then it's not great.
The first thing I thought of was 70 teams. You'd have all these teams that are like worried about whether they're going to be included, Oklahoma State or Baylor or Tech or K-State.
Everybody not in the top two, and Notre Dame.
Even SMU, yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
I just asked Stuart if he
standpoint,
could jump on with us tomorrow. That'd be fun to watch.
From that standpoint, it would be good news for everybody. But how do you continue to deal with the competitive imbalances? I mean, do those just continue to grow? I don't know. There's obviously a lot of questions, but it's a fun thing to think about. And this has been brought up enough times by enough parties and same parties in a lot of cases that usually float what's coming next or the ideas that are on the horizon, that it's obviously very much in the cooker, and they're trying to see what it looks like.
It's very misleading. Go ahead.
I would also note that one of the sources that they talked to said that the idea that there's untapped financial avenues for this is naive, according to one executive. And I believe them, given the fact that, the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Right,
No,
yeah.
there you go. Yeah. This is just a random response, but I like what this is very misleading headline. Nothing burger here. Hit me up when the leaders like Greg and Tony are actually involved, or ESPN. Till then, you get nothing, which is, again, I don't know whether or not they're involved in this or not. Sankey will absolutely let us know.
I can't wait for somebody to to send this to Kim Jong Sankey and him say no. No. So wait, would we have to share money? Would the ACC and the Big 12 get as much as us? And they're like, probably a little bit more. And he's like, that's
Nobody cared about college football's ecosystem.
Yeah.
So would this not fly under that umbrella? Wouldn't this be better for everybody as a whole versus some big break off?
I still think that,
or is he full of it?
Let's just say that there were 7 10-team divisions. There will be different percentages for those who are a part of it, whether you're a part of Division A, B, C, or F. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nothing burger to some extent, as in it's not happening right now or probably anytime soon. But I don't think you can just take the constant mentioning of something along these lines, the constant mentioning of it in Fox articles and ESPN articles and so on and so forth, and not think that obviously they're floating ideas for a reason, and they're floating these things because there's absolutely talk behind the scenes. Now, whether that amounts to anything or not, it might be nothing. But, if Greg Sankey does care about the greater ecosystem of college athletics, this seems like it would be a great deal for all involved. But again, devil in the details. This is a very loose, article in terms of those types of things. And how would 7 10-team divisions work? So suddenly Texas and Oklahoma aren't in the SEC anymore.
And they're back in the same division
part of it,
with Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. They don't want that.
That part of it doesn't compute for me right now without reading more of the article and hearing more about this. But the Super League, I mean, that's been bandied about for years now. So there is something behind it. But if it's this iteration of it, remains to be seen.
All right, let's break here. Paul Catalina